COVID recovery plan, whether you wanted to do some scrutiny on progress against the actions in the COVID recovery plan. So there's a couple of other kind of suggestions there from the corporate leadership team. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I invite Councillor Fulton McAllister to say a few words on the sort of Labour group, well, thinking on this, please?
Brilliant. So we in the Labour group feel that there's three really important topics now that we appear to be coming out of COVID with the vaccines seeming to reduce hospital admissions, and the government absolutely hell-bent on ensuring that we don't go into another lockdown. Obviously, we may end up in other lockdowns, but I think the majority of the public want to see what we're going to be doing to help the economy improve, what we're going to be doing to ensure that we meet our commitments to going carbon neutral, and to ensure that the poorest in society don't fall through a safety net which is having massive holes cut in it by the Tory government. So the three scrutiny items we will like to see go forward will be the item on social inclusion, because actually there's a large role for the Scrutiny Committee in terms of ensuring that that the council can pick up some of the slack from the £20 a week, £100 a month universal credit cuts that will occur, in terms of ensuring that we are more generous on ensuring that people are not evicted because of mild levels of arrears, ensuring that we coordinate the charity sector and ensuring to fill some of the gaps left by the government, and ensuring that we use other mechanisms at our disposal, such as the council tax reduction scheme, to ensure that we make sure that people do have additional funding in their back pockets. That's one of our key areas. The next is ensuring that the environmental strategy is implemented. COVID has delayed some of the council's plans, and actually we need to be holding the council to account, and we see part of our role as Labour group on scrutiny in helping the council to meet its targets through robust scrutiny. And finally, we think that actually we see how empty, for example, the Royal Arcade is at the moment. We saw during lockdown multiple shops closing and vape shops opening up in the city centre, which essentially did show the decline of the high street, and we need to ensure that Norwich's high street is a vibrant shopping location. We've always appeared in the top 10 shopping locations in the country. We need to ensure that we continue to do so, and where possible, we need to ensure that that big online retailers who have bases in the city, such as Amazon, are paying all the taxes that they should be paying. We should also be working with the trade union movement to ensure that they are put under additional pressure to support the local retailers, so that poor terms and conditions and unreliable employment cannot be used to replace our high street. And I think that the public would consider a lot of these to be priorities for the council. Just lastly, we have been working with Jamie from the Green Group on the green finance, and we would be very happy to consider that as part of the environmental strategy, because obviously it is an area which can improve our already excellent record on protecting the environment.
Thank you, Councillor Fulton McAllister. It's worthwhile stating, by the way, which I should have done beforehand, whilst I'm inviting political groups to set out their particular stall on this, a reminder for members that scrutiny is an unwhipped committee, and members should be voting according to their particular views rather than any particular group basis. Councillor Osborne, do you just want to say a few words on the sort of Green Group thinking on this? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll start with the green finance topic, which was one that the Green Group, well, myself, put forward, and just, I spoke to the Chair and to the Vice Chair about this topic a few weeks ago. I hope that this is actually something that we can do soon, as in potentially next month, in October, because the idea of it is that it can be integrated into the budget setting process. We can actually be looking at what are the sources of finance that the council can use to build on its environmental ambitions. I realise that may mean work for officers, but a lot of that work I think is already available. I've spoken previously to officers about a lot of the ideas that are in that topic form, so I would hope that it should be possible to write up a report for the October meeting on that. I also think that it's possible for the council to get in external invitees into for that meeting. So, for example, UK 100, we would do a lot of work on green finance and provide the secretariat for the all-party parliamentary group on sustainable finance, and advise a lot of councils on sustainable finance mechanisms. Just on the integrating it into the environmental strategy, I appreciate what Councillor Fulton McAllister says. Personally, I think I've scrutinised the environmental strategy 4 or 5 times now, and I know that other colleagues have as well. I'm not sure how much more we're going to get out of it that hasn't already been said. I also think that the green finance topic is quite a specific thing, and it is worth focusing on that and having a real focus on that, so that we can get some clear recommendations that can be integrated into the budget strategy rather than broadening out. And that is a theme that I'm going to come back to again and again in this when it comes to setting the work programme, because scrutiny works best when it is focused. So the other topics that have come from Green councillors is, I'll start with the one on tennis, and I'm sure that Denise may want to speak more about that, but in the last 10 years or so, the City Council's spent, either from its own purse or from other budget sources, so other organisations, but through grants, spent, I think, up to £90,000 on tennis, but there hasn't been 900,000, sorry, add an extra zero onto that, £900,000 on tennis, but there has not been a review, so far as we know, of how effective that's been, or what the impact has been on social equality, on access to the sport, and so it's high time that there is that review. Another topic that Green councillors suggested was parks and streets and biodiversity, because we see that despite the commitments from the council to reduce or end the use of herbicides and pesticides, that is still ongoing. There's also some lack of clarity often on the relationship between the City Council and the County Council when it comes to maintenance of biodiversity along highways land. So in my ward, for example, we've seen community groups who are growing veg patches where that veg has been killed by spraying, and we're still not clear whether it was the City Council or the County Council that did that spraying. So there is some work to be done on clarifying that. And likewise, looking at the pollinator action plan, the biodiversity strategy, and holding the council to account on developing those and implementing those. Again, that needs to be a clear focus, and it's looking at where things are not working already, or where there's a lack of clarity on what the council's role is. I'll come back to the Labour points, but I'll do that later on. So those are the points that I wanted to make. Just the final thing is the waste and recycling one, which is actually a topic that I submitted last year in 2020. I'm happy to leave that for now. I would want to see the outcomes of the Environment Bill before we look at that. I think it can be tied well to that.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Osborne. So what I propose to do, thinking about timing, we'll have around about an hour of debate on the various items, if it takes an hour. Then we'll have a comfort break, and while there is a comfort break happening, I will have a discussion with officers, and we will consider how the discussion has gone in terms of what will need to happen to whittle down to the three we have left, and what sort of system we might use to achieve that. So, but at this stage, I'll open the floor to debate from colleagues. Councillor Osborne, your hand is up so soon.
Yeah, it's just I thought that the biodiversity could be integrated into the NCSL work program item, because if that's already if that is already on the work program, and obviously a lot of what NCSL does and a lot of what the rationale, as we were told, for bringing services back in-house was to provide better environmental quality, and I think it's worth scrutinising that specifically.
Thank you for that. I might just turn to my left to ask Louise if you have a particular view or comment on the practicalities of that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think that the item for NCSL will be focused on the business plan, and is quite a significant item in itself. I mean, there may be an opportunity to kind of consider a sort of a very narrow, limited scope of the biodiversity area, but I think that time might be an issue there. Councillor Osborne?
Can I come back on that, Chair? I don't know what the experience of other councillors is, but certainly I'm hearing and the responses I'm getting back from inquiries that I'm making about work that NCSL was scheduled to carry out or has been asked to carry out, is that there is sometimes delays and that the quality is not what was expected yet. I don't know how true that is, but I think it's something that we need to scrutinise, and so I don't know whether that's something that can be included in the business plan, but looking at the quality of the work and the timing of it. And I think that the other thing I was going to say is that the biodiversity, I think that should also form part of the business plan, because realistically NCSL is not going to have the same sort of clout as Norse did as a big provider of services, and so in some ways, if the company's going to be making profit, then it needs to be looking at providing high quality and including high environmental quality services, and so looking at how the company can provide that high quality environmental service and protect and enhance biodiversity could make it a unique selling point for the company.
Thank you, Chair. So, of course, we do now have the shareholder panel in place to monitor and discuss the performance of the company. So the issues you were talking about there with regard to performance will be picked up at the shareholder panel. The business plan, of course, there would be an opportunity to kind of scrutinise the information coming forward and the activities in the business plan. But I think if you want to do a kind of in-depth piece about biodiversity, that there probably won't be enough opportunity in that business planning item to do that.
Thank you. Any other members who wish to say anything at this stage? Councillor Stuteley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, picking up on a point that Councillor Osborne made about the confusion between what is the responsibility of City Council and County Council. Is that something that we can ask officers to work on separately, so that we can create some kind of definitive answer to that, a map, or so that both authorities work together, and that could be a separate project outside of scrutiny anyway, because I think members of the public, as well as members of the council, would benefit from that definition.
Thank you. Bring in Councillor Osborne, and then
I think that has been done. At least there's a list. I think it was circulated a few months ago. Whether it was circulated to all councillors or just to my group, but there is a list somewhere of whose responsibility is what. The issue comes when I think there are some areas where that list doesn't seem to be being followed, or things get bounced between groups, and it's very difficult to actually work out who is actually doing the work.
Yeah, that's correct. There is a definition of who's responsible for which, and actually Councillor Fulton McAllister will be able to determine that more accurately. What I was thinking of is sometimes where there's confusion amongst the members of the public and members. For example, the railway track through the Lakenham Way is neither county or city responsibility because the pathways, railway pathways, control that. So perhaps Councillor Fulton McAllister can help us with that too.
Before I bring in Councillor Fulton McAllister, I wonder if this is information that once it's available could be put into My Norwich, so that when people are clicking on a particular area, that it will actually tell them who owns and maintains, if it doesn't already do that. Thank you. Councillor Fulton McAllister.
So just on that, while there are lists of who has control of what, there are areas which neither the City Council nor the County Council claim to have any authority over, and clearly one of the two do. And in those areas, the NCSL has taken a pragmatic approach of, if they're doing work close by, then, and it's, let's say it's grass cutting or something, they'll mow over it occasionally if it's no extra real labour intensive work. However, there are a considerable number of grey areas, and NCSL is still learning a number of those and trying to identify where the responsibility lies, so that we know if we do or don't need to maintain them.
Absolutely. I can think of examples in my own ward where there is some confusion between whether it was owned by a private landowner or one of the councils for a piece of land that was considered to be public and had been in public use, but actually turns out it was privately owned. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I feel like this is now straying away from the scrutiny topic. So we've already heard from Louise that there's not going to be scope to look at biodiversity. I hope there can be other ways to do that, but can I come on to some of the points that the Labour councillors were making on the topics that they were putting forward? I really feel that those topics, obviously the social inclusion and the economic recovery from the pandemic are hugely important, but they're massive, massive topics. And I really feel like it needs to be focused both for the sake of effective scrutiny and for the sake of officers, so that officers aren't having to pull something out of this massive topic. And I really don't feel like the scrutiny committee should be lumping that work onto officers. So I'd ask the Labour group, or ask members, because it's not meant to be political, what we'd actually be looking to get out of those topics. Personally, I think that on the social inclusion topic, it might be worth looking at where are the gaps in provision of services, who's falling through the cracks, because there are people falling through the cracks, and why. That's where I would hope that there could be actually productive focus, and that could actually look for the council to work with partners to spread that net wider.
Okay, thank you. Before I bring in Councillors Carlo, Giles and Manning, and that's the order I've seen you indicating, Louise, can I ask you a question? In terms of the three we heard presented as being ones that would be of interest that Councillor Fulton McAllister talked about, the practicalities of having one of those available for the October meeting. I'm conscious that the slots we have available are October, November and January, and October is only a few weeks away in report writing terms. So of those sustainable and inclusive Norwich economy, environmental strategy review and emerging new social inclusion agenda, are any of those capable of being ready for October?
There's also the green finance.
And green financing, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think on the green finance matter, I will need to just take that away during the break and have a conversation with colleagues about whether there's resource to support that in October or November. So I'll take that away during the break and ask some questions. In terms of the sustainable economy and emerging social inclusion agendas, I mean, yes, they are big topics, and I think we probably need to nail down kind of specific areas for us to be able to consider one of those for October. Alternatively, on the environment item, there is an environmental statement and a plan of action coming to Cabinet in October around the environmental strategy, with an eye to a new environmental strategy in about March of next year. So I mean, it could be that's something that could be considered in one of these earlier months.
Thank you for that. Well, I'll bring in Councillor Carlo next, then Councillor Giles, then Councillor Manning.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My feeling is that whatever topics come out of the meeting today are agreed, that the recommendations reflect the importance of the topic. I'm concerned that at times in the past, the recommendations that have come out really are quite feeble, actually, out of important topics. And I'm thinking, for example, of homelessness in Norwich, where the recommendation was to receive a briefing from officers on City Council's work. But it didn't. Scrutiny didn't change anything at all. It was informative for councillors, and I valued it, but it didn't actually make any difference to the council's work. And another one is universal credit. Again, another important topic, but the only recommendation that came out was to support people with better IT help, and nothing further came out than that. So I'm wondering, topics of social recovery, social support and economic recovery, social inclusion and economic recovery are important, but looking at how they've been fleshed out here, the social inclusion one, for example, which the last year was no more than a headline, I now read that poverty and social exclusion has been discussed significantly, particularly at full council on multiple levels from a wide variety of councillors. And then what difference can scrutiny make? It says, examine the opportunities to amend and update the social inclusion strategy. But I want to see something concrete coming out of it, not just amending the strategy. And in relation to economic recovery, again, to renew the economic recovery strategy. Well, hopefully, this is an ongoing piece of work by the council, and I want to see the council using every opportunity, which I'm sure it is doing, to address these huge topic areas. And so, as Councillor Osborne has said, that we need to narrow them down, otherwise we're just going to come out with a lot of fluff, I feel.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne, I'll bring you in shortly. I've noted you after Councillor Manning. So, Councillor Giles, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think that residents in Norwich do want us to look at taking a strategic approach to dealing with the bread and butter issues that are most important to them, and not focus on what are perhaps fringe issues such as what playing surface should be used at Higham Park. In relation to the social inclusion topic, I would like to see us focus in on reviewing the new non-commercial debt policy in the context of the government's breathing space policy, and in the light of what we see this winter. I mean, we all know what's going to happen with the end of furlough, the reduction in universal credit, the rise in national insurance, the end of the energy bill cap, etc., etc. I could go on. And I think we're going to see a lot of people get into spiralling debt. And I think reviewing what our policy is in relation to that would be really critical. And I think there's scope for engaging with our NCAN agency partners in what their input is into that. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the frog in my throat this afternoon. But this meeting is sort of like any other we've had when setting the work programme on scrutiny. It's the age-old problem we have each year of having a great set of topics and the difficulty of whittling them down into a set of topics that we squeeze into our work programme. And this year is no different. But the year is different in that we're in a pandemic, which stating blinding the obvious. And Matthew and Jamie set out the party's stalls at the beginning, and I think we need to take a view pretty quickly whether or not we agree on the primacy of COVID as a matter for scrutiny. And I don't want to put words in Jamie's mouth, but I felt he was almost saying it was too big for us to look at. And in a sense, that's obviously true, but there are some very specific aspects of COVID which affect this city. And I think given the power that the Scrutiny Committee has in principle, we shouldn't pass up the opportunity to look at those. And I'm happy to try and whittle them down. Whether we can do that in this meeting or outside of it, I don't know. But I really think that history should show, the people of Norwich, that we didn't miss the opportunity to look at this rigorously as far as we could across whatever scope of COVID we thought would affect the city, and not to be distracted by other topics such as a tennis court or a use of a particular weed killer. I'm not saying those are not important matters, they absolutely are, but not this year, I think. And to pick up on Denise's point about scrutiny sometimes feeling a bit toothless, well, that's probably true, but that's always true of scrutiny in any local authority and at government level as well. I don't think it's inevitable that we will have recommendations or policy changing decisions to make, but what is important is that we have the opportunity to make those points and to generate debate from the witnesses that we have at this committee and in the recommendations that come out of it. So my own feeling, looking at the topics we've got, I should just say I'm having a little bit of difficulty looking at them on screen without paper copies, but that's probably my fault. I think, I'm not sure the rest of the meeting has planned whether we're going to go through them one by one and decide whether or not they sort of make the cut or not. But I think we need to either agree or not that COVID is a major topic for us, which we should look at as far as we can and just try and whittle these down fairly quickly, bearing in mind that it demands an officer's time this afternoon. We're already sort of 40 minutes in and are still talking about what we might do.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was going to say, I'll bring in Louise in a second, but actually when we started the previous civic year and we were having meetings remotely, and I think I said then that every bit of scrutiny we did should be through the prism of COVID, because that was such an important thing. And I actually fully agree with Councillor Manning's point that actually that effectively has continued into this year, and we're still looking at things through this this once in a multi-generation hopefully issue that we're going through, an experience that we're going through together. So I think there is a lot of mileage in looking at things that are impacted by COVID. Louise, I'll bring you in, then I'll bring Councillor Osborne in after that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and just to follow up on Councillor Manning's comments, really, of course. The role of scrutiny, not always to make recommendations, but to seek assurance that things are being done in the right way. We do have a comprehensive COVID recovery plan, blueprint for recovery. That has some topic areas that might play to some of those topic subjects that you've kind of raised and flagged here today. So there is that option to look at, the COVID recovery plan, perhaps in some areas to kind of monitor and look at delivery against those topic areas.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I think that it's clear, and I know that the Labour Group have decided what topics that they want to discuss, and by weight of numbers, those are the ones that are going to go through. What I think is important is that we've worked out what in those topics is actually the focus. And that's what I'm trying to say when I'm saying, those social inclusion topics is huge, and what is the focus going to be? And I'm still not clear on what because we've talked about everybody here has had a different focus on what that could be, or a different idea for what that focus could be, and so I think we need to be clear on that.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughan Thomas, please. And Councillor Stoodley, I see you hand. Yeah, Councillor Stoodley after that.
These topics are huge, I mean, and they mean a lot to all of us, I mean, without doubt. But as a scrutiny committee, it's what we can do to recommend and what the City Council can do. And the COVID recovery plan is staring us in the face. It's about those practicalities, as far as we can be practical in the scrutiny committee. We're talking about recommendations or analysing those particular issues. So it needs to be brought to particular account of what we're doing and what we haven't done, and what further things can be done. I mean, I agree, people are falling through the gap. I'm meeting them every day. Yes, we need to look at those sort of things. These externalities which have been ignored in the past. The GDP that counts everything except those things that really matter to us and make life worth living. These are things that the COVID has made us look at, and we've now changed the way we have certain work patterns. We didn't like it, some of the things we do like, but how we can actually move forward from that, the recovery plan, and use that and implement that and analyse it. That's what we're here for. But they are huge subjects, and it goes beyond what were our capacity, quite frankly, and the officers' capacity. But the COVID recovery plan and those implications for the sustainable economy and social inclusion particularly, and the environmental strategy, it's a no-brainer, but we need to bring it to particular account what we as a city council can do and what influence and what practical steps we can take given the restrictive funding that's available now and going to be even more restricted in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Stoodley, then Councillor Osborne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Giles highlighted an element of social inclusion, the non-commercial debt policy, which is a significant area and also very timely. So if we can narrow that particular area of social inclusion down, we can tick that particular box right now. Assuming Councillor Giles has put that forward, I'd like to second that, please.
What I'm proposing to do is move to a series of votes in a minute where we yay or nay the various items before us and see what that whittles down to, if that's acceptable.
Of course, yes. In terms of social inclusion, we have one subject put forward for the element of that.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I was going to suggest the same thing. So yeah, no, thank you. Just one final thing. I think it is also worth, when writing the topic or the report that is coming forward. I appreciate what Louise has said about that sometimes scrutiny is about assurance. But I think it's also good to look at what the council can do, and I think it is really important that we have recommendations. Otherwise, otherwise we're just wasting time talking about stuff. And there's no point in having scrutiny as a talking shop.
Thank you. If you bear with me for a second, just while I make sure that the list of things that I'm about to read out is accurate in terms of the topics that are before us, and then we'll have a quick yay or nay, and then we'll think about what the next step is in terms of fleshing out at least one of the topics that remain, so there's something very concrete for October. I think I've got emergency planning stuff with green finance. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think, items that I'm going to ask for effectively a yes or no, whether you like to go forward with those items. So this civic year, so voting no to something doesn't mean that you're anti it, but you may have taken a view that you don't think it fits within the constraints we have in terms of time or numbers of meetings this year. So, can I have Councillor Carlo?
I don't know about others here, but I don't feel going through the topics one by one, saying yes or no is the best way. I'd rather go for a sort of consensus, and yourself, Councillor Osborne and Councillor Fulton McAllister had a bit of a discussion beforehand about a possible sort of grouping of three. Given that we've only got 3 slots to fill this coming year, and
well, I mean, as you're aware, I think, and other members of the committee are, in the past we have arrived at our work programme through consensus, and that is my preferred option always. It certainly feels, listening to the debate, that there are 3 items that come forward, but I think, and I'll look to our monitoring officer for a steer on this, about whether you feel that, given that there are more items than we have slots, whether we need to have a vote on that, or whether we could achieve it through what appears to have emerged.
yes, before the proposition.
And I can't give you an absolute answer here. There's no definitive response to the approach you should absolutely take. If there is room for forming a consensus view, identifying that, and then somebody proposes and seconds it formally, I think that's quite a helpful thing for a scrutiny committee to be able to do. If you can't then reach consensus, then revert back to the voting is what I'd normally suggest.
Okay, thank you. So the Councillor Fulton McAllister.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say, obviously, depending on how we do this, but with regard to the green finance issue that Jamie was discussing, we were proposing that was combined with the environmental strategy, and thinking of Louise and her team's workload, potentially that the environmental strategy part of that scrutiny meeting focuses on the statement which is coming to Cabinet, and our scrutiny of that, which we could then have green finance as a part of that meeting. We'd be happy to have both of those on a broadly similar topic, but obviously it depends on how you're putting these forward to us, because we would ask those were combined.
Thank you. So we have then a consensus, I think, around 3 items, one of which is the sustainable, inclusive Norwich economy, the review of the environmental strategy, and with green financing that's being dealt with at the same meeting, and the emerging new social inclusion agenda. I'm happy to propose that, if I can have a seconder for that, please, Councillor Giles. So who would like to vote in favour of those items being taken forward for our 3 slots?
As a consensus thing, yeah.
That is carried unanimously. In which case, what I'm now going to do is, you can have a 10-minute comfort break while I have a discussion with officers about how we can best use the rest of the meeting to see about putting a bit of extra detail on those topic forms. And so, yeah, we'll be back here at 5:25 to resume the meeting. Thank you.
Just a bit of extra detail. Yep, we're good. There's a delay. So.
Okay, welcome back everyone. Thank you for your patience while we put some detail on the topics that are coming forward. If I, at this point, hand over to Louise, who will be able to give us some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you, councillors. So we've we've considered the three topics that you've put forward and would like to propose as follows, that in October the item could be based on the environment statement and the plan for development of a new environment strategy that's going to Cabinet earlier that month, so we could bring that in October for Scrutiny's consideration and recommendations. So that would be your October topic. Social inclusion, we could bring that in for your November meeting. I think that we'd probably like to go away and just kind of consider the scope of that and then share that with committee if that's acceptable. We'd probably like to think about whether we could use the COVID recovery plan and the social inclusion strategy as the basis for your discussion and your scrutiny on that item, but we could come back to you with some kind of better defined scope on that item. And then sustainable economy, to bring that forward in January, early next year. And there's been some recommendations. Councillor Osborne has recommended, the work of the Good Economy Commission could be considered there. And there's some other items that we could bring in for you to consider. Does that sound acceptable?
Well, thanks very much for that. I'll open the floor to comments on that. That seems to make perfect sense to me. And in terms of the scoping for the sort of social inclusion agenda, obviously I'm conscious there was a particular request there from Councillor Giles, I think, in relation to that was seconded by Councillor Stutely, but maybe we can pick that up when we look at the work programme in October, it being a standing item. But yes, comments on the floor. Councillor Giles, did I see your hand up? There, please.
Yeah, I was going to ask Louise what her thoughts were on incorporating a review of the new non-commercial debt policy into the social inclusion item in November. Thanks.
Yes, I think that's a good suggestion. We could include that in there.
Great, thanks very much for that. Any other comments at this stage? Members happy with that sort of order of things? We've got something that is workable for October, a bit more work to do on November, and for January looking at the inclusive Norwich economy with reference to the Good Economy Commission. Everyone? Councillor Giles.
Sorry, Chair. I was wondering if there was any scope for seeing if the LEP could send someone along for the economy item in January. I thought it was very useful when they came before, given the amount of power and resources they have at their disposal.
It was incredibly useful, actually, and you're absolutely right. They are a significant part of our economy, and useful to make sure they're being. We're able to find out how they can fit in. So yes, Councillor Osborne. And then Councillor Fulton McAllister.
So obviously the LEP's a good suggestion. I think Business Improvement District might be helpful. But I'd like to try and balance that by having somebody there from the trade union movement. So if we could reach out to Unite, GMB, USDOR, one of the main unions who represent any area of the economy which operates predominantly within the city centre, that would be really helpful, because we should be trying to ensure that we have a voice who will advocate for high quality work rather than just the business side of the argument.
Yes, that's very interesting. I wonder whether sort of USDOR might be a particular one, given the sort of retail, the changes that are happening in retail, particularly, and how that might be impacting on those workers. So, yeah, thank you for that. If there aren't any further comments, then I can call the meeting to a close. And we've got a work programme, and we'll meet again in October.